the abrogation of Article 370, which was the part of the Constitution which guaranteed the special status, the autonomy of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, that had been put in place at the very inception of the modern state of India. You agreed that the government had a right to abrogate Article 370. Many legal scholars were deeply disappointed with your decision because they felt that you had failed to uphold Constitution. Explain to me why you took the decision you did.
Well, Stephen, at the outset, I must tell you that since I was the author of one of the judgments in the case, a judge, by their very nature of the profession, has some restraints on either defending or critiquing their judgments. But I'll briefly answer your question, notwithstanding my caveat, which is this, that Article 370 of the Constitution, when it was introduced into the Constitution at the birth of the Constitution, was part of a chapter which is titled Transitional Arrangements or Transitional Provisions. It was later renamed as Temporary and Transitional Provisions. And therefore, at the birth of the Constitution, the assumption was this, that what was transitional would have to fade away and have to merge with the overall text, the context of the Constitution. Now, is 75 plus years too less for abrogating a transitional provision? So
if I may interrupt, it's not just about the abrogation, it's also about the wider decision you took, which in essence was to demote Jammu and Kashmir from the status of a state to what's called a federal union territory. You even robbed Jammu and Kashmir of its status as a state, and you put no deadline on when that status should be restored.
Stephen, look at it dispassionately. We said that what was intended to be a transitional provision, if the government which is accountable to the people, an elected government, takes the view at the center that we are abrogating what was essentially a transitional provision, that's fine. Second, and that's very critical, the Supreme Court said, can I just have a moment to answer this? The Supreme Court said that the democratic process in Jammu and Kashmir must be restored, effectively setting a timeline for that.
You didn't set a timeline.
We did. Yes, we did. We did set a timeline for the restoration of the democratic process. We set the timeline of 30th September. Elections took place early in October, and a democratically elected government is in place in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, but the point is it's a democratically elected government which doesn't have the status of a state.
All right, I'll come to that in a moment, but let's go step by step.
No, if I may, because we've got a lot to get through and all of this is complicated. I just want you to address the criticism that came, for example...
But you'll have to give me an opportunity to answer the criticism as well.
I just wonder what difference it makes to you when you hear well-known civil rights lawyers like Prashant Bhushan say the Supreme Court's decision was, quote, an act of capitulation. The court signaled that it is willing to accept a naked power grab by the federal government.
That's a perception of one lawyer. Let me give you the perspective.
Well, with respect, there's many lawyers I could quote. Let me quote you Dushyant Dave, for example, former president of the Supreme Court Bar Association, who said this decision about Article 370 was one of many decisions in which Chief Justice Chandrachud not only failed, but didn't even attempt to succeed in terms of combating majoritarian power.
Again, completely wrong. Again, completely wrong for the reason that after our decision, which laid down a time frame for holding elections, you have a democratically elected government in place. And there's been a peaceful transfer of power to a government which is a political party and a political dispensation, which is not the dispensation in the union government in Delhi. So this itself is a clear indicator that democracy has succeeded in Jammu and Kashmir. Second, about the fact that they had converted the status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into 3 union territories, the Union Territory of Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir. We have again accepted the undertaking of the union government. We asked them, would you like us to issue a direction? Or are you going to give an undertaking? The Solicitor General sought time, he sought an adjournment, he consulted the government at the highest level and has made an unconditional statement before the court that the status of Jammu and Kashmir as a state would be restored as soon as possible.
Yeah, with no timeline. That was my point. No timeline. But let's move on to a couple of other important issues.
But you see, therefore, that the Supreme Court, in that sense, we have ensured democratic accountability. We've ensured that a people's government is in place. And I therefore think, the criticism that we didn't apply our constitutional mandate is not correct. Maybe there are two people on one end of the spectrum who have this view. You will have other people who have another different view.
A different issue, but also very important.